Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. My name is Utpala, and we are covering Foundation Course 4, which is Proof of Future Lives. And today we are going to dive more deeply into SEMA, accurate perception, and what that means. So before we get started, let's set our motivation for being here. So that we can plant as powerful seeds as we possibly can. So we can take the fullness of the opportunity that we have to plant seeds to create a future experience of being a person who is totally correct. That every perception we have, including of ourselves speaking to others, is without error. Totally unmistaken. And if we couple together, if we add on to that kind of accuracy, that kind of being truth, if we add on a wish to only benefit others, all others, we could become the kind of being that is truly a lamp in the world. We could truly help other people. And may every millisecond of this time we have together, may we may those be the very cause for us reaching that state. And if you would like to join me in the prayers, Sangye chudan soki chuknam la. Changchu pardu dakni kyapsu chi. Daki chishe ki pe sanam ki. Drola penchir sangye drupasho. Sangye chiran soki chuknam la. Jangchu pardu dakni kyapsu chi. Daki chishe gi pe sanam ki. Drola pinchir sangye druparsho. Sangye chiran soki chuknam la. Jangchu pardu dakni kyapsu chi. Daki chishe ki pe sanam ki. Jola pinchir sangye druparsho. Sashi puki chukshin meto tram. Rira blingshi ninde genpati. Sangye shindu mikte uwaki. Jokun namdak shinga chuparsho. Yidam guru ratna mandalakam niryadaya. So before we get started, were there any questions um, that came up to you over the weekend? No, all perfectly clear? You are all very, very suspicious. Okay, I'll take it. You're giving me the opportunity to talk about this stuff. Thank you. Oh, and I have a just a questions for you. So when I share over my shoulder like this, um, can can you read it okay? Is it legible to you? Yes? Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, diving more deeply into tsema, into accurate perception, pramana. So we're going to start today. Oh, no, it's very small. Uh-oh. Is that better? Or is it better that I share the whole screen and you stop looking at me, which is fine? Whole screen is better. Okay. Did I stop the share? Oh, there. Sorry. Content only. Okay, there we go. Okay, great. So we're going to talk about the definition of an accurate perception. And it's interesting. It has two parts. Um, the definition is Sardu milue rikpa. Sardu milue rikpa. So it actually has three parts. But sardu, the root word is sar, which means fresh. It's a fresh perception. And adding the de at the end turns it into an adverb, freshly, afresh, anew. Milua, this means unerring, not in error. And rikpa means state of mind. So a state of mind, it I think actually Michael translates it as a state of mind that is fresh and unerring. But the way I read it, because it's sardu, freshly, maybe it's a state of mind that is freshly unerring. What the difference in meaning is, not much, not at all. It's just that it links the word freshly, I think, more directly to the state of mind as being fresh. And for Rikpa, we could say perception, but we don't want to use the same word in the definition as the word being defined, right? That's a no-no in Buddhist logic. So we translate Rikpa as a state of mind. So that state of mind is fresh. What it's doing freshly, anew. But before we get into, what that means, the fresh and unerring, just wanted to introduce that definition to you. And then we're going to get to what it means by talking about states of mind that are not accurate, states of mind that are not sema. And we call that se mingilo. Se mingilo. This min is a negative particle, and lo means mind. So states of mind that are not se, which is here referring to sema, accurate perception. And the shortcut is se min. Se min. Not accurate. So we're going to talk about 5 kinds of se min, 5 kinds of perceptions that are not accurate perceptions. First one is hopefully pretty clear for us, and it's called lokshe. Lokshe. The word lok Geshe Michael, he translates that as ass backwards. Totally not just wrong, but like thinking totally opposite to the way things are in our example here. So if to talk about lok or this totally wrong, if we think about lokta, that means wrong view. And the example that they use for wrong view is not believing in karma. But it's not only not believing in karma, it's believing that karma does not exist. So it's totally backwards. It's a totally wrong view. Lokta. And then she here is another word for it can mean knowledge, it can mean perception. Sometimes we see it with the word rab, sherab, which means wisdom. So here it means like an understanding or some knowledge that we have is lok, is ass backwards. It's inside out. So I think I can't remember which class it was. One of we've only had two. That's how good my memory is. I talked about like when I have these little floaters in my eye, these little bits of, I don't know what their technical term is. People just call them floaters. If you have any sort of age on you, if you're getting older, you start to see them. Little bits of the interior of your eye floating around in the fluid, and you see it like a little piece of dust, but there's no dust. It's just this little thing in your eyeball. Something to look forward to if you don't have them yet. But I have little black spots that float around. And I, even though I know I have this condition and I know what it is, there are times when I'm sitting outside and I think I have this perception of a fly coming straight toward me. And that would be a lokshe. That would be a totally wrong understanding of what's going on. There's no fly. It's just a little black spot in my eye. It's not even outside of my eye. Even conventionally speaking. Okay, so that's the first kind of seimin, inaccurate perception is a mistaken, we can just call it simply a mistaken thought. The second kind is called taesong. Taesong. This is primarily, this word is translated as doubt. Doubt. We have doubts about something. And we talk about, for example, after a person has the direct perception of emptiness in meditation, after that experience, they have no more doubt about the Buddhist teachings. They know they are correct. So if we look more closely as what doubt is, it's a mind that's split into two sort of not quite conclusions, but two ideas about an object, about something. So there's two kinds of doubt here that we talk about. One is dun mingyur gitetsong, and one is dun gyur gitetsong. Oops. My cursor got a little excited there. So dun mingyur gitetsong and dun gyur gitetsong. The only difference is this word min. And I forgot. Oh no, yeah, it's min because there's this little character here. And when that is at the beginning of a word that follows a word that ends in an open vowel, it's a very heavy prenasal. Mingyur. If we were just reading it, not knowing that, we would say don mi gyur ki. But it's don mingyur ki. Anyway. So what does that mean? The first one, don mingyur gitetsong. This is a doubt that isn't sure about something, right? But it's leaning towards being wrong about it. So if someone asks you, is the moon a sphere? And you say, well, I'm not quite sure, but I think it's triangular. It's more like a pyramid, I think, than a sphere. And if it were Dungyur Gitetsam, is the moon a sphere? You'd say, well, I'm really not sure. I've only ever seen this one side. I mean, they make a big deal out of saying we only ever see this one side of the moon. How do we know it's a sphere? But it kind of looks like one. I think it probably is a sphere. So that's doubt, being of two minds, but we're tending toward the correct understanding. I mean, we did get pictures from the far side of the moon last week. That was kind of cool. So if we have a doubt about something, if we are of two minds about something, we are not grasping the object clearly. We're not holding it clearly. So it's not a pramana. It's not an accurate perception. Now, these aren't going to be on your homework, but they're, I think, important to know so that we can get at the fullness of the meaning of an accurate perception. If we're going to talk about 5, so we've got 2 so far: a mistaken conception, and then doubt, which could be of either doubt tending towards being correct or doubt tending towards being incorrect. So we've got these 2 major kinds of seimins, perceptions that are not accurate. And why is it important that we know what a perception is that is not accurate? Because remember, we defined last week, we defined what existence is, right? Existence is seme mikpa, that which is perceived by an accurate perception. So if we're if we are filled with inaccurate perceptions, we can't say that something exists or not, because we don't have an accurate perception about what it is we're perceiving. We can't even be sure it exists. And that was Gyaltsabje's problem, or the problem that he raised with people is you can't even give me a proof that a Buddha exists. You take refuge, you say the words, but have you had an accurate perception of a Buddha? How can you say a Buddha exists for you? So those are 2 kinds. So the third kind of seimin, or perception that is not accurate, is she. This is a word basically meaning recollection. Memory, remembering something. So remember, we had the word sardu in the definition of accurate perception, which means freshly. So here is our example of the opposite of freshly. And this is she is defined as the perception of something that you have already perceived. So if I say, look at that bookcase behind me, and then I ask you to turn away and say, well, what did you see? And you say, oh, I saw what looks like maybe a bookshelf, a bookcase. That subsequent perception in your mind of a mental image of what you saw freshly what you saw anew when I asked you to look. In this school, in the mind-only school, the sutra school, a recollection is not a valid perception. It's a perception that was triggered by an accurate perception. You had the fresh, accurate, or not mistaken perception of a bookcase in the first moment, but then the second moment, when I asked you what you saw, you're seeing a mental image of what you saw directly with your eyes moments before. And that sometimes in some texts, they translate this as a subsequent cognition, which is a little difficult, that phrase. But it's just a recollection of what you just saw directly, or what you previously saw directly. And we know, I mean, we can kind of understand why some philosophical schools would have a problem with recollection. I mean, how many times do I do not have a very good memory. So it's no problem for me to say, yep, recollection is not an accurate perception. But those are really, I'm just usually just wrong, plain out wrong. Not doubtful, sometimes doubtful. But even for people who do have a pretty good memory, thinking back, like, what did I have for breakfast on February 15th of 2021? We might be able to take a guess. If something striking happened that day, maybe it's our birthday. It's not my birthday. But maybe it's our birthday. Then we might have a recollection that is correct. But for most people who didn't have something, important happen that day, won't have a clear recollection of what they had for breakfast. I mean, even if they eat the same thing every morning, and they think, I know I had, oatmeal with oat milk for breakfast. It's not from the sutra school, mind-only school point of view, that mental image of that breakfast is not clear. It's not strong. Now, the higher schools don't accept that recollection would be included in the list of tsemens, right? but we're in lower schools primarily for this course, and so it's it's good for us to understand what other philosophical schools in the Buddhist tradition, what they think about the way the world is. Because we do oftentimes find ourselves um, holding points of view or acting in the world wearing a different philosophical hat. So for now, we just remember that Sheshe, this third of the 5 types of perceptions that are inaccurate, uh, is one that's held by lower schools and not by higher philosophical schools. The fourth one is Yiche. Yiche. And this means speculation. So this is this ch here is a it's related to the word for analysis. So we're using some kind of analysis. We're excuse me, we're thinking about a situation and we're speculating as to what we're seeing. And remember, we had that quotation last time, where the Buddha said, if you're enlightened like me, you can judge someone else. But if you're not, you will truly fall. And this speculation is very close to judging someone or something. So we have to be careful. Um, if we speculate, that's not considered an accurate perception, but it's something that we as human beings do all the time. We take these we take our perceptions of the world that come in through all of our doors of sense, and we're trying to make sense of the world we see. We're trying to understand, is this a glass of something that will help me or harm me? I need to know, before I put it in my mouth. Or if women have this experience, I think, far more than men, but men may have it in certain circumstances. But walking down the street at night, women have to be very aware of, we're making speculations about if we see a male figure approaching us, is this someone who's going to harm me, or is this going to be okay? each speculation. We could also translate that as assumption. I assume that this person is safe to be around. And the dangerous one, if you've taken the course 7 on the Bodhisattva vows, there's a vow against expressing anger to a bodhisattva. And the thing is that we don't know who bodhisattvas are, right? Is that person a bodhisattva or not? So best that we not get angry at anybody. It may be a bodhisattva. So if we look, if we examine our own experience, and it would be a good thing to do over the next couple days, just watch your mind as you come into contact with other people. Watch what your mind does. I should say, if you're like me, when I make these judgments, sometimes they tend toward being unfavorable. If I were going to be walking around judging other people, it would be great if I judged them as having far better qualities than they have, rather than having worse qualities than they have, right? If I'm going to be wrong about someone, better to be wrong the other way, as long as I'm safe. Okay. And mainly our perceptions about other people are inaccurate because we don't know what they're thinking. We do not have a direct perception of their thoughts, their motivation. What motivation did they do when they got up in the morning? What are they thinking right now? We think we know, but we're just speculating. Each So if we know this about ourselves, that can be a very powerful tool. Because once we know this about ourselves, then we can be on the lookout and we can cut off those kinds of thoughts about other people, primarily, right? Okay, so that was the fourth kind of perception that is not accurate. Each speculation or assumption. The fifth kind of semen is called Nangla Mengepa. Nangla Mangepa, sorry. It's kind of a tongue twister for me. Nangla Mangepa. Nang means appear, and la means to. So appears to us. Mangepa. Ngepa, we translate it as ascertain. Ascertain. It also we can use the word we fix when we're talking about perception, that we fix on something. Like if we're in a state of single-pointed concentration, we are fixed on our object. We are ascertaining our object, but we're fixed on it. So this fifth kind is appearance that's not ascertained, that we're not fixed on. So, for example, if you've ever done anything like learned how to play an instrument, or practice meditation, learning how to direct your mind, or if you've ever like writing things, writing something that is complicated, maybe could be something like a complex mathematical formula that you're creating. The mind is very fixed on the object. We're very focused on that object. And it's like, you could say it's holding all of our attention. And then if something else happens in the room that you're in, or nearby, maybe you sort of hear a noise, but you don't go off of what you're working on. It just sort of happens there in the background. So you don't like switch to wonder, well, what was the cause of that noise? Is someone opening the door? Did someone drop something? Was that a car backfiring? None of that goes on. You just continue working on what you were working on, and these other appearances are happening. You're having an appearance, but you don't focus on it. So, like, while I was explaining this part, probably not very well, I heard something outside. And as I think back on it now, that was the garbage truck coming by. But while it was coming by, while that appearance of the sound of the garbage truck driving by was coming to me, I paid it no mind. I was focused. I was fixed on your little pictures on my monitor. So it's like that. I mean, I've had people, I do a lot of editing and writing. And I am so focused on what I'm doing on the computer that, other people, not so much now that I live alone, but when I lived with other people, they would come and go, they would work in the kitchen or whatever. Um, and I would not be paying any attention to what they were doing. And sometimes they'd be asking me a question and I would know there was some sound going on, but I wouldn't realize that, oh, they're asking me. Oh, you're talking to me? So appearance that's not ascertained. That's nangla mangepa. It appears to your mind, but you only have a very sort of fuzzy perception of it. Like maybe just sound and not words. So those are 5 kinds of inaccurate perception. Um, and if we look at all of our perceptions during the day, a lot of them are fuzzy. Um, a lot of them are speculation. Sometimes we have the doubt experiences. So it's good for us to recognize that, if we have a, excuse me, if we have a tendency toward uh, each making assumptions, having speculations about things. If we can notice that about ourselves, then we know what we can work on. It's good to notice so that we can work with our mind. It's good to be aware of where we are, so that we can address what needs to be addressed. If we can't see that, we might do some practice that, is not going to touch it. So the practice of these teachings is not like magic. It's not like, oh, if I do this, if I do that, I will become a Buddha. Like, no, it's all about recognizing in ourselves, in our own minds, when we are having mistaken ideas, basically, about the world. Learning how it is we are mistaken so that we can address that. So now we have a better idea of what an accurate perception is. That freshly, that word sardu, freshly, that is the counter to recollection, right? And then not mistaken, unmistaken part of the definition is basically all the other ones, the opposite of all the other sorts of inaccurate perceptions, right? The milua, unmistaken. All these other ones were mistaken in some way. So we talked very briefly about Seimei Keibu. Seimei Keibu in previous classes. And I think it was the first class, actually, at the end of the first class. Because Master Dignaga, remember the story of him writing on the cave, on the walls of the cave. And he was talking about 5 qualities of an enlightened being. He was starting his text, the Chishu, and the first thing he mentioned was that the Buddha was Tseme Kebu. Now, Kebu, this means person, individual. It's related to a word kewa, which we see in the stories of Shakyamuni Buddha before he was a Buddha, when he left. He was a prince, right? Prince Siddhartha was his name, Siddhartha, and when he snuck out of the palace, and he came into contact with Kye, Ga, Na, and Chi. He came into contact for the first time, basically, birth, aging, sickness, and death. So Kye is birth, and normally Kye is like it's used in this idea of types of suffering. But the pu, Kyebu, it's a different spelling, so it's related to the word, but it's different. So here it means someone who's been born as a person. So, and same may is sema with just a little particle on it on the end. It's a person of sema, a person of accurate perception, an accurate perception person. But we did talk about this the first class. Remember, I talked about how there are 3 kinds of changing things in the world. Hopefully, maybe someone remembers, but it's changing things can be divided into mental things. There we go. Mental things, physical things, or neither mental nor physical. Like Utpala is neither mental nor physical. So at Sema, we've been talking about its definition is a state of mind. So how can a state of mind be a person? A person can't be a state of mind. That's kind of silly. That would be like saying, that would be like saying, I'm anger instead of I'm angry, right? I am anger, not I have anger.
Что там сказала-то? Что там говорила-то?
I hear a language I don't understand. That's my speculation about that. So a person, we don't say, oh, I am anger. We say, I am angry, meaning I have anger. Uh, a person can't be a mental state. So what? So it must mean something else, right? It has to, because it's just not, especially in a course that is focused on using logic and reasoning. We have to say, it doesn't make sense that this means a person who is accurate perception. What it means is a person who has only accurate perceptions. Every single perception, every moment, every millisecond of experience of an enlightened being is an accurate perception, is totally correct. The chapter in Dharmakirti's book, remember, he wrote the book that was a commentary on Master Dignanga. So in Master Dharmakirti's book, the chapter in which this discussion occurs is called Tsema Drupe Lu. Lu is chapter. And this is Tsema Drupe. Drupa is to prove or to establish. So this is the chapter that is proving that the Buddha, that an enlightened being, is always correct. In teachings about, we talk about the 5 paths. If we're practicing these teachings, and the 5 paths that lead us to enlightened state. The third path, and path here meaning realization. The third path is called Tonglam, which is the path of seeing. And it means having the first part of it is having a direct perception of the lack of self-existence to me, to the self. And in the subsequent part, in the second part of that path, we have the realization that we have never before seen anything correctly. Now we need to make a distinction between the kind of correctly that we're talking about in that circumstance, this realization that we've never seen anything correctly, and what we've said in this course, which is that the majority of our perceptions are accurate perceptions. So they're not contradictory statements. It's just, what do we mean by accurate and what do we mean by correctly? So when we're talking about having this realization that we've never seen anything, we've never had a valid perception. What that means is we've never seen, let me put it this way. Everything that we've perceived before that point of having the direct perception of emptiness, everything we've seen before has been mistaken with regard to the difference between the way a thing appears to us, the way a thing appears to exist, and the way it actually exists. Things appear to us to exist from their own side, but the way they exist is that they have no self-nature. There is a lack of a self-nature. That's what we see when we see emptiness directly. So our realization is that we have never seen that before. When we're talking about same as accurate perceptions, we're talking not about how a thing exists, its true nature. We're talking on more of an appearance level, that, this thing appears to me to be a glass of water. And it is a glass of water. When we're talking about that realization at the path of seeing, we're saying, I've always been mistaken about this thing. It appears to me to exist from its own side, that it was outside of me, and I reached over with my hand and I picked it up, and it feels like it's a real thing that has its own qualities that are inherent to it. This one needs to be cleaned, but it's basically clear, and it functions to hold fluid, right? So it works, but doesn't have any of those qualities from its own side. It only has the appearance of these qualities because I planted seeds to offer a thirsty person something to quench their thirst. So we shouldn't get confused when we hear about, in the third path, when they say, oh, we realize we've never had an accurate perception or a valid perception, that's what they're talking about. That seeming dichotomy between how a thing looks to exist and how a thing does exist. Versus, yeah, it's correctly identified as a glass of water. That's it, Seema. So now a question arises in my mind is um what are we talking about when we say that an enlightened being is uh, an accurate perception person? Because what we do on the 5 paths is once we've seen emptiness directly on the 3rd path, the 4th path, the 5th path is the result. We reach enlightenment. The 4th path, Gomlam, is all about becoming used to what we saw on the path of seeing. We may go into another direct perception of emptiness. We may practice those meditations, but it's also about how our life has dramatically changed because of this realization that things don't have a nature of their own. And we're getting used to that life from this point of view of that wisdom, right? Things still look to us, things still appear to us to exist from their own side, to have some kind of self nature. But because we saw emptiness directly, we are no longer deceived by it. We no longer fall for it. We get used to the idea that we're not picking up, we're not reaching our hand out to pick up a solid glass that's filled with water, that functions as a vessel for water, to thinking like, oh, I am experiencing the results of my past actions of giving water to someone else. That it appears to me to be in a glass that functions as a vessel. And that's just an appearance. So when we talk about when we go through that 4th path, which can take, 7 lifetimes of us getting used to what we saw and what that means for our life. We are in some way, like building this capability to be a person of accurate perception, a person who is totally correct. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Only an enlightened being is totally accurate. In every moment, they see appearance and the absence of self-existence. In every moment, with every object. And we talked before in last week, we talked about like the need for logic, for reasoning, so that we can come to an accurate perception about three different things, right? We divided the world into things that are obvious, things that are hidden, and things that are deeply hidden. Obvious things are like what we experience directly through our sense powers. And then hidden things are things that we can only perceive using logic, using reasoning. So there were three objects we talked about that if you are who you appear to me to be, that you haven't seen directly. Three things. Yeah, that's interesting to think of logic as a kind of third eye. Yeah, and by understanding logic, by understanding especially Buddhist logic, the rules around Buddhist logic, and the more we practice it, the more it can be like our third eye. So these three objects are Tarpa, Dang, Tamche Kempa, Dang, der Drupe Lam. Three things that we need to establish with an accurate perception in order really to practice this path in a way that will quickly bring us results. And we talked about was it Kejite or Gyaltsabje? Who is Gyaltsabje? Anyway, that student of Tsongkhapa's who said that you Tibetans don't know what you're doing when you prostrate, do these full body prostrations and circumambulate Mount Kailash. You're just doing exercise basically. You can't prove to me that enlightenment exists. You can't prove to me that you are that your action in prostrating yourself to an enlightened being, you can't prove to me that enlightened being exists. And if you can't prove it to me, then because the Buddha doesn't exist in our time, Shakyamuni Buddha doesn't exist in our time, we can't have a direct perception of him. We can't use our sense powers to see him or hear him. We have to use the other kind of accurate perception, which is Jepak Sema, which is deductive reasoning perception. Accurate Deductive accurate perception. Sorry. Deductive accurate perception. So we have to understand Buddhist logic well so that we can have a deductive accurate perception. And we want to have it towards tarpa, which is moksha in Sanskrit, which means freedom, meaning freedom from the cycle of suffering, or nirvana. Nirvana. Freedom, which is the permanent cessation in which one has eliminated the mental affliction obstacle in their entirety due to one's individual analysis. That's the definition of nirvana. Suffering jail, right? Getting freed from suffering jail. That's the easier way to put it. Basically, the end of our mental afflictions, the end of our anger and jealousy, permanent cessation, because we saw emptiness directly and had the subsequent we experienced the four Arya truths, right? The truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of a path to reach the end of suffering. We saw that. We had a realization of those truths at the path of seeing. And because of that analysis, that drives the path of habituation, Gomlam, where we get rid of all of our mental afflictions and obstacles to nirvana, freedom from suffering, being released from suffering jail. Oh, we'll have to get to this question. So let's quickly go through the rest of the content to talk about, because I would like to talk about that. Thank you for your question in the chat. So nirvana, that's one of the objects that we cannot have a direct perception about. We have to have a deductive, accurate perception about. We have to use reasoning. The second one is Tamche Kempa. Tamche, that means everything, all things. Tamche. Kempa means knowing, to know. So this means omniscience, which means it's referring to a Buddha, to the state of being fully enlightened. Omniscience. And then the third thing, in Russian, what is it? Thank you. Der Drupelam. Der Drupelam. Der means to them, referring to the first two, nirvana and Buddhahood. So to them, drupe, and this is a different spelling than we're used to. This drupe means to travel or to go somewhere. And lam means path, right? So it means the path for going to those two, the path for traveling to those two, nirvana and Buddhahood, right? We can't see that path directly. We have to use deductive reasoning to see that path, to have an accurate perception that that path is an existing thing, in that that path is the cause. That path will result in nirvana and omniscience. It's not just a list of things to do. We want to have an accurate perception of these three. If we understood and understand in a way that means if we know, not just intellectually know, if we know, if we are certain that nirvana, enlightenment exists, and if we know that this path that we're studying will bring about those two as a result, if we have certainty, then our practice, I mean, you can sort of feel it in your heart, right? If we have certainty about this, our practice would be fantastically powerful. It would be, in a way, real practice, not just going through the motions. So it's so important that we learn how to reason, so that we can have this kind of understanding, this kind of knowing. We can have an accurate perception of them. So we talked before last week that there are two kinds of accurate perceptions, right? There was ngunsun sema, which is direct perception with our senses, and there's chepak sema, which is deductive accurate perception, or I don't know. You can use reasoning, but it's more tricky in English. I don't know about other languages, probably as well. That reasoning accurate perception, that sounds a little I don't know, it doesn't sound quite right. But we are using deduction to have an accurate perception. We are using reasoning to have an accurate perception. We just have to use more words. That's all. Now, there are different types of deductive reasoning. The first one we're familiar with. The first one is basically logical reasoning. It's what we normally think of when we say reasoning. The second kind of deductive perception is a little more tricky, but it's one that we have to use, and I'll explain why in a moment. This one is called belief in an authority. And that belief in someone as an authority, that belief in someone as being someone who speaks truth, that belief is based on deductive reasoning. Otherwise, it would be what we call blind faith. And blind faith is not strong. Blind faith is not an accurate perception. Belief in someone as an authority based on deductive reasoning, that is one of the types of deductive accurate perception. Okay? So now the difference, we talked last week about that there are two kinds of hidden reality, right? There's regular hidden reality, kultur, and then there's shintu kultur, or very deeply hidden reality. The example of hidden reality is emptiness, the lack of a self nature to things. The example of deeply hidden reality is the functioning, the workings, the mechanism of karma. Now, hidden things like emptiness, we can have an accurate deductive perception of it before we have a direct, accurate perception of emptiness. We can use reasoning to have an accurate perception of what emptiness is. All the classes we go to and all of our meditations where we contemplate emptiness, those are deductive perceptions of emptiness. Hopefully they're correct, they're accurate, unless someone has taught us, mistaken ideas. But we can have this, we can have a deductive, accurate perception of emptiness using reasoning. We can't have a deductive, accurate perception of of someone as being an authority. No, I just mixed that up. Erase that. We can't see something that is deeply hidden just by reasoning alone, just by deductive reasoning alone. We have to take it from an authority, someone who we hold as being an authority based on reasoning, establishing that person as being an authority on this topic. And then that belief is based on like solid reasoning, that you can believe what this person says about karma. You know, you can't see karma. We can't logic karma. We can't logic, we can't reason of why the stripes on my shirt go horizontally and not vertically today. You know, what was the cause of that? You know, that one I couldn't tell you. We get general ideas. Be generous with other people, and you will see others being generous with you in the future. But there's also, you know, there's some karmic correlations that we can't really reason them out. They don't, there's not a logic to them that we can perceive with this particular body and mind. This particular body and mind, this human body and mind of mine, doesn't have the capability. It's limited by, you know, there are limitations. I can only see certain colors. I can only hear certain decibels or pitches. I can only, my tactile sensitivity is limited to what the nerves at my skin can detect. You know, they don't detect everything to a particular degree like that. So I am in this, even though this body and mind is the best possible kind of body and mind for practicing this path, it's still limited. It's still constrained. So I have to use what reasoning I can, what capability to reason that is available to me, to establish someone as being an authority, so that I can see things, I can learn about things that I otherwise could not. And then the third type of deductive perception is what we call convention by similarity, which is a sort of convoluted phrase, but it just means we look at this thing and we don't perceive a pen, but we as a species, we may not use the same word pen, but we have said that, okay, this is a thing that I can use to write things, and we call that a pen in English. You call it what you call it in your language. You all the people who speak that language agree, this thing is a pen, or it's whatever your word is. I'm a hilarious teacher. Thank you. That's my highest dream. So we agree by convention, by, all of us agreeing this thing is a pen. This is what we call this thing. But that is not so important to us in our practice of the path. Those first two are important to us. Using reasoning and using a belief in an authority, which is based on reasoning. So it's all based on reasoning, right? Excuse me. Reasoning is such an important factor. So obviously, we're not going to prove that these three things exist in the next 2 minutes. So this is just, we're setting the stage for starting to explore this idea. You will see, you do your homework first and then look at the answer key, right? When you look at the answer key for question number 5, which asks you what kind of accurate perceptions you need in order to establish that, that nirvana and Buddhahood and the path that results in those 2 states, that they exist. The answer that it gives is, I think, just from my mind, doesn't go far enough. You can be brilliant students when you answer this question if you not only say that, yes, you need to use 2 types of valid perception, right? The direct perception and deductive perception. But if you also talk about that there are 2 types of deductive perception, the answer key doesn't talk about those 2, which I think you brilliant students already know that you would add a discussion about those first 2 types of deductive perception, reasoning and belief in an authority. And I didn't get to your question. So what I'm going to do, how can I do this? I need to copy this and I'll talk about it first thing on Thursday, okay? Is that okay? I hope okay, because now we're at time. So please don't forget, please dedicate, because we created a ton of seeds. We planted a lot of seeds towards becoming a person who is totally accurate. So thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, live translators. You're amazing. Thank you, ACI. Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Internet. Thank you, Geshe Michael. And see you on Thursday.
Thank you so much, teacher. Thank you.